A virgin was sold to a billionaire on their first night. His unexpected vow took her breath away. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm that night tore through the California coast like an angry god. Inside the Hale mansion, chandeliers flickered, throwing gold light over marble floors that had seen more power than love. Lila stood by the window, her reflection pale against the glass. The satin dress clung to her frame like a secret she couldn't escape. Her fingers trembled around the wedding contract, her signature still drying in ink. Outside, the rain was merciless. Inside, silence was worse. The heavy doors opened, and Alexander Hale entered tall, immaculate, a man who seemed carved from control itself. His eyes, gray and unreadable, met hers. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. "Why did you buy me?" she whispered, the words barely audible. He looked at her for a long moment, then stepped closer until the scent of rain and cedar filled the air between them. "Because your life was for sale," he said, then added softer, "but I have no intention of owning you." Lila blinked, confusion and disbelief colliding in her chest. "Then why?" Alexander's gaze didn't waver. "To protect you from the men who would." The wind howled against the windows, and for the first time, she noticed the faint exhaustion beneath his cold expression. He handed her a folded paper, an additional clause handwritten beneath the legal ones. She read it silently. Asterisk. No harm shall ever come to her. Asterisk. Her eyes lifted to his, and he said the words that would change everything. "From this night forward, no one will touch you. Not even me." The vow cut through the storm like a promise no contract could contain. Somewhere inside her fear, something strange flickered relief, maybe even trust. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He turned away, removing his wedding ring, placing it on the table like a symbol of restraint. "You'll stay here 6 months. After that, you're free." She wanted to ask why his voice carried a shadow of pain, but he was already walking toward the door. "Good night, Mrs. Hale." When the door closed, Lila pressed her back against the wall, breathing hard. The mansion felt endless, filled with art and silence, yet no warmth. She touched the clause again, tracing the words with her finger, wondering what kind of man would buy a woman only to promise never to touch her. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Inside, a strange calm settled. She didn't know it yet, but the man who vowed not to love her had just begun to fall. Morning light broke through the rain clouds like a cautious promise. Lila woke to the quiet hum of the mansion, the faint scent of coffee drifting through the hall. Her first thought was disbelief that she was here at all, married to a man she had met only hours ago, a man who had bought her freedom but not her body. She sat up, fingers brushing the smooth silk sheets, still unsure if she was safe. The clock read 7:15. The housekeeper knocked softly before entering, leaving a breakfast tray by the door, and a note written in the same precise handwriting she had seen on the contract. "Eat something. There will be clothes in the wardrobe. Do not worry about appearances today. A.H." She stared at the initials. Alexander Hale. The name carried weight, even in silence. She dressed simply, a cream blouse and jeans that fit too perfectly to have been guessed. When she walked downstairs, the grand foyer stretched before her like a museum. Sunlight poured through tall glass windows, glinting off marble and steel. She had never seen so much space belong to one person. At the end of the corridor, a piano stood open, untouched. In its reflection, she saw him. Alexander was seated by the window, in a black shirt, sleeves rolled, reading a newspaper. The contrast between the man and the morning was almost unreal. He looked up. "You slept well, I hope." She hesitated. "I did not think I would." "Good," he said, folding the paper. "I have business downtown. The staff will assist you with anything you need. You are free to use the library, the gardens, anywhere within the property." His tone was formal, almost detached, but there was no cruelty in it. "You do not have to pretend this is normal," she said quietly. He paused, studying her. "Normal is overrated." Then he left, his footsteps echoing down the marble hall. When the door closed, she exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath the entire time. The rest of the morning passed slowly. She explored the house, each room immaculate but lifeless. In the library, she found something unexpected, an unfinished painting resting on an easel by the window, a rough sketch of a woman's face, half-shaded, the eyes strikingly sad. The name on the corner read, Clara. She traced the outline with her gaze, wondering who Clara was and why he had never finished the portrait. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. The butler stood there politely. "Mr. Hale asked me to inform you that your father's debts have been fully cleared." Lila's eyes widened. "All of them?" "Every cent, miss. The documents were processed this morning." Gratitude rose in her chest, mixed with confusion. Did he say why? He said promises should be honored. When the butler left, she sat in silence, staring at the portrait. A strange warmth spread through her, fragile but real. By evening, the sky had cleared. She walked outside into the garden, the air smelling of wet roses. From the terrace, she could see the city below, small and distant. A car pulled into the driveway, sleek and dark. Alexander stepped out, his tie loosened, fatigue shadowing his eyes. For a moment, he looked human, not the billionaire she had been sold to, but a man carrying invisible weight. "You are still awake," he said, surprised. "I like the quiet," she replied. He nodded slowly, then glanced at her bare feet on the stone. "You will catch a cold." "After last night, I doubt the weather can hurt me." His lips curved, just barely, the first sign of humor she had seen. "You might be right." They stood there in silence, two strangers bound by a vow neither fully understood. Above them, the stars began to return. Lila looked up, whispering, "Maybe freedom is not always about leaving." He glanced at her, eyes unreadable again. "Maybe not." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of the ocean. For the first time, the mansion did not feel like a cage, but a question waiting to be answered. Days began to fold into one another like quiet pages of a book no one else would ever read. Lila's life in the Hale mansion settled into a strange rhythm, somewhere between isolation and discovery. Each morning, she woke to the smell of fresh coffee already waiting outside her door. Each evening, she found herself walking through rooms that felt haunted not by ghosts but by memories she did not understand. She rarely saw Alexander except at dinner, where conversation was polite, sparse, and measured like a business transaction. Yet behind the calm, she could sense something unspoken in him, a tension that hummed beneath every glance. One afternoon, while exploring the West Wing, she stumbled upon a door slightly ajar. Inside was a private study, lined with books and photographs in silver frames. She paused at one picture on the desk. A younger Alexander stood beside a woman with the same sad eyes from the painting in the library. Her name was engraved on a brass plaque below the frame. Clara Hale, 1985, 2016. His wife. Lila felt a chill she could not explain. Before she could step away, the door creaked open behind her. Alexander's voice filled the space, low and steady. "You should not be here." She turned quickly, guilt washing over her. "I am sorry." The door was open. "I did not mean to intrude." He crossed the room, setting a folder on the desk, his expression unreadable. "You did not intrude. You just found what is left of my past." Lila hesitated. "She was your wife." "Yes," he said simply, eyes fixed on the photograph. "She died 8 years ago. Car accident. They say time heals, but they never tell you. It only teaches you how to hide the scars." She studied his profile, the slight tremor in his jaw when he said her name. "You loved her very much." He looked at her finally, enough to forget what love costs. There was no anger in his tone, only resignation. She wanted to say something, but words felt too small for grief that old. Instead, she nodded. "I am sorry." "Do not be," he said softly. "You did not take anything from me." But as he walked past her, she caught a flicker of pain in his eyes that told her she had touched something fragile. That night, Lila could not sleep. She sat by the window, the contract still on her bedside table. the clause about safety glowing faintly under the lamplight. For the first time, she wondered if his vow had not been about her innocence at all, but about his own guilt. The next morning, she found a small easel set up in the conservatory. A note beside it read, "For your hands, not your mind, A." Inside the note was a set of brushes and paints. She laughed softly, remembering how long it had been since she had painted. Maybe he had noticed the way she stared at Clara's portrait. As she began to paint, colors flowed like something she had forgotten she needed. Hours passed unnoticed until she sensed someone behind her. "You are talented," Alexander said quietly. She froze, brush still in midair. "You should not sneak up on people," she replied without turning. "Old habits," he said. "In my world, silence is armor." "And in mine," she said, still painting, "silence is punishment." When she finally looked at him, his expression had softened. "Then I hope this house stops punishing you," she smiled faintly. "Maybe it already has." A moment of quiet passed, long enough to feel like a truce. But then the phone in his pocket buzzed. His voice hardened instantly. "I have to take this." He stepped away, pacing near the window. "No, the acquisition cannot wait. I do not care what they offer." His tone was sharp, commanding, and it was like watching a mask slip back into place. When he turned, she saw the distance in him again, the man the world called ruthless. "Back to your kingdom," she said softly. He met her eyes. "It is not much of a kingdom without peace." And then he was gone, leaving the faint echo of truth behind him. Lila sat there in silence, staring at the unfinished canvas, her heart caught between fear and something dangerously close to empathy. The following week unfolded with an odd kind of calm, like the pause between two storms. Lila continued painting in the conservatory, and Alexander continued disappearing into his business world of mergers, meetings, and phone calls that seemed to last longer than sunsets. Yet every evening, he returned before dinner, never missing a meal. They would sit across from each other at the long dining table, silverware glinting between them like a line neither dared to cross. Their conversations, once hesitant, had grown softer, almost natural. He would ask about her day, she would ask about his. Sometimes he even smiled, not the polite smile he wore for the world, but a tired, genuine one that reached his eyes. On a Friday evening, he surprised her. "There is a charity gala tomorrow," he said, setting down his wineglass. "I would like you to attend with me." She nearly dropped her fork. "Attend? As what? Your contract wife?" His mouth twitched in amusement. "As my wife. Period. People already know we are married. It would be stranger if I appeared alone." "I do not belong in places like that," she murmured. "Neither do I," he replied, "but we go anyway." The next night, a stylist arrived with a team. The transformation felt surreal. Lila stood before the mirror, wearing an elegant black gown that shimmered with each breath she took. Her hair was swept into soft curls, her lips tinted rose. For the first time since the wedding, she looked at herself and saw not a frightened girl, but a woman who could face a room full of power. When she descended the staircase, Alexander was waiting at the bottom, dressed in a tailored tuxedo. His gaze caught on her, and for a fleeting second, he seemed to forget to breathe. "You look different," he said finally. "Different good or different bad?" she teased softly. "Good," he said after a pause. "Too good, perhaps." The drive to the event was quiet, filled with city lights gliding past like memories they had not yet shared. At the ballroom entrance, flashes from cameras erupted. Lila's heartbeat quickened. She leaned closer and whispered, "They know who I am? They know what I choose for them to know," he said calmly, placing a steadying hand on her back as they stepped inside. The crowd parted instantly, whispers rippling through the room. It was a world of diamonds, champagne, and perfectly rehearsed smiles. Lila tried to blend in, to keep her chin high. But she could feel eyes on her, weighing her, judging. Halfway through the evening, a woman approached tall, poised, wrapped in expensive confidence. "Alexander," she purred, touching his arm. "You did not tell me you remarried, and so quickly." He stiffened. "Monica." Her gaze shifted to Lila, eyes gleaming with cruel curiosity. "And this must be the reason you have been avoiding dinners. Quite the upgrade from your previous choices." Lila flushed, gripping her glass tightly. Alexander's voice dropped, low and dangerous. Watch your tone. Monica smiled thinly. Relax. Everyone knows the story by now. The mysterious girl you bought out of nowhere. Tell me, Alexander, did you pay in cash or kindness? The room went silent. Lila froze, humiliation clawing at her chest. But before she could retreat, Alexander took her hand and faced the crowd. You are right about one thing, he said. She is priceless. And if decency were currency, none of you could afford her. The words hit like thunder. Cameras clicked again, this time in awe. Lila blinked, stunned, as he guided her away from the stunned onlookers. In the hallway outside, she stopped him. You did not have to defend me. Yes, I did, he said simply. You are my wife, Lila. Whether this began as a transaction or not, you deserve respect. She searched his face for sarcasm, but found only truth. Something inside her shifted, quietly but completely. That night, when they returned home, the silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt alive, fragile, like something that might one day turn into love. For the next several days, the memory of that gala followed them like a shadow that glowed instead of darkened. People whispered, reporters speculated, and the photo of Alexander standing up for her became the headline of every business column. Yet inside the mansion, everything remained quiet, almost delicate. Lila found herself replaying that night in her head, the way his hand tightened around hers, the calm certainty in his voice when he called her priceless. It was the first time she had felt truly seen. One morning, she joined him in the kitchen, something she had never dared to do before. He looked surprised to find her there barefoot, making coffee in a plain white shirt. You do not trust the staff anymore? He asked with a hint of amusement. No, she said, smiling faintly. I just thought maybe billionaires forget what real coffee tastes like. He chuckled, a sound so rare it made her heart ache. Then show me what real coffee tastes like. They stood together in the quiet clatter of spoons and the aroma of roasted beans. For the first time, Alexander looked like a man, not a headline. Over the next weeks, the walls between them began to soften. They ate breakfast together, sometimes shared stories. Lila learned that he loved classical music, but never played the piano since Clara died. He learned that she painted because color was the only thing that ever made her feel alive. Sometimes they would walk through the garden at dusk, saying little, just existing in the same peace. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the horizon, he turned to her and asked, "When was the last time you were truly happy?" She thought for a moment. "Before my father got sick. Before I started thinking love was something you paid for." He nodded, looking away. "You deserve more than this arrangement." "So do you," she said softly. "But maybe this is what we both needed, a place to stop running." His eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, but he said nothing. That night, rain returned, tapping against the glass like a quiet reminder. Lila could not sleep. She went downstairs and found him in the library, sitting at the piano, his fingers resting on the keys but not pressing them. "I did not mean to wake you," he said without turning. "You did not," she replied. "I was just wondering what it sounds like when you stop hiding." He looked up, startled, then gave a small, tired smile. "Would you like to hear?" She nodded. He began to play. The melody was gentle, broken in places, but beautiful like grief learning how to breathe again. Lila stood by the window, her eyes filling as the music filled the empty halls. When the song ended, he looked at her and said quietly, "I never thought I would play for anyone again." "Then thank you for letting me be someone," she whispered. The air between them thickened, fragile and electric. For a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped. But before either could speak again, the sharp buzz of his phone shattered the stillness. His expression darkened as he read the message. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Just business," he said quickly, rising to his feet. "A merger dispute. It can wait." But his tone betrayed him. Later that night, when he thought she was asleep, he went to his office and closed the door. Lila, restless, followed quietly. Through the crack, she saw him arguing on a call, his voice low and furious. "I told you, no press about my personal life. If they print that she was sold, I will ruin you." Her heart froze. So the rumors had reached the media. Someone had leaked the truth. She stepped back into the hallway, her pulse racing. The safety she had begun to trust felt like glass now clear, beautiful, and breakable. She whispered to herself, "He defended me once. But how many times can one promise hold before it breaks? Upstairs, the rain grew louder, and for the first time since the night they met, she wondered if the storm was coming for them again. By morning, the mansion no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a ticking clock. The newspapers had found the story, splashing her name beside headlines that read, "The Virgin Bride Bought by Billionaire." Lila stared at the printed words in disbelief, her hands trembling as she read them again and again. Every secret she had tried to bury was now public. When Alexander came down the stairs, already in his suit, she stood in the center of the foyer holding the paper. "You said it would not happen," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "I am handling it." "Handling it?" she repeated, her voice breaking. "They are calling me a commodity, Alexander. Do you know what that feels like?" He looked at her then, his eyes filled with something she had never seen before: guilt. "I told them to keep it quiet. Someone inside leaked it. I will find who." "And what happens when you do? You sue them? Buy them too?" The words came out sharper than she intended, but they hit the truth between them. He took a step closer. "Lila, I am trying to protect you." "By owning me?" she asked, tears glinting in her eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "You do not own me, Alexander. You bought time, not my soul." She placed the newspaper on the table and walked past him. He reached out but stopped himself, his vow echoing in his mind. "No one will touch you, not even me." That promise, once noble, now felt like a wall between them. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Phone calls, statements, damage control. Alexander moved like a storm contained in a suit. Lila, meanwhile, packed a small bag. She needed space to breathe. That evening, when he finally returned to the mansion, the house was too quiet. He found her in the conservatory, standing beside the unfinished painting she had started weeks ago. "You are leaving," he said, not as a question, but as a realization. "For a while," she replied softly. "I need to remember who I was before all this." He stepped forward. "I can fix this." "Maybe you cannot," she said. "Maybe it is not something you can buy back." He looked at her, every word she spoke landing like a wound. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lila." "Then stop trying to save me by controlling everything," she said. "You think power can erase pain, but it only hides it. You taught me that." Her voice shook but did not break. He stood there, watching as she lifted her small canvas, the one of the ocean she had painted on her first week there. "Keep this," she said, placing it on the piano. "Maybe it will remind you that even waves cannot be owned." She turned to leave, and for the first time, he did not stop her. When the door closed behind her, the silence returned, only now it hurt. He sank into the nearest chair, the paper still lying open on the table. The world outside thought he was a man who could buy anything, but the truth was simpler and crueler. He could not buy forgiveness. Days turned into weeks. Lila stayed with a friend in the city, painting again, taking odd jobs, living quietly. Her face disappeared from the tabloids, but the ache in her chest did not fade. At night, she replayed his voice in her head, the way it softened when he said her name, the tremor when he swore he would protect her. And she wondered if promises could survive in the real world, or if they always broke under the weight of truth. Back at the mansion, Alexander sat at the piano she used to listen to. His fingers hovered over the keys before pressing one note, then another. The melody was the same as the one he had played for her that night. Only this time, every note sounded like an apology he would never have the chance to speak. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, quiet and relentless, covering everything that once burned between them. Winter stretched long and cold, each day blurring into the next. In the city, Lila found work at a small art studio, teaching children how to paint. Their laughter filled the space where her heart used to ache. She told herself she was fine, that leaving Alexander was the right choice. But at night, when the studio lights dimmed and the streets went quiet, she caught herself glancing at the door, as if he might walk through it. She never told anyone that part. One evening, as she cleaned up after class, a man in a dark coat appeared at the door. For a second, her heart leapt, but it was not Alexander. It was his assistant, David. He looked nervous. "Miss Lila," he said softly. "Mr. Hale asked me to give you this." He handed her an envelope and left before she could say a word. Inside was a simple letter written in Alexander's familiar, sharp handwriting. "The company is under investigation. Someone from my board leaked your contract to the press. It was not an accident, it was revenge. I wanted to protect you, but my silence only gave them power. I am sorry. You once told me that waves cannot be owned. You were right. But some tides return on their own. She read it 3 times, her chest tightening with every line. Beneath the letter was a small folded check donation to the art studio in her name, large enough to keep it open for years. She did not cash it. Instead, she locked it in a drawer and whispered to the empty room. I do not need your money, Alexander. I just needed your honesty. Weeks passed. The tabloids moved on, and so did the world. But his absence haunted her like a melody unfinished. Until one night, the news broke. Hale Enterprises CEO collapses during board meeting, hospitalized in critical condition. Lila froze. The words swam before her eyes. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and ran into the street, the city lights blurring around her. Hours later, she found herself standing at the entrance of Westbridge Hospital, the same place she once dreamed of affording for her father. The irony burned. Inside, the nurse led her to the private floor. Through the glass, she saw him, Alexander, pale, motionless, wires running from his chest to the monitors that beeped softly. Her knees nearly gave way. He overworked himself, the doctor explained quietly. Dehydration, exhaustion, and stress. He has not slept properly in weeks. Lila nodded numbly, her hand pressed to the glass. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated, then sighed. 5 minutes. She stepped into the room, the air heavy with antiseptic and quiet regret. Sitting beside the bed, she took his cold hand into hers. You were supposed to be invincible, she whispered. Too strong for the world to touch. But maybe you just needed someone to remind you that you are human. The monitor beeped steadily, like a slow heartbeat answering her. For a long while, she said nothing, just held his hand and watched the rise and fall of his chest. Memories rushed back: the contract, the vow, the music, the silence between them that had always said more than words. A tear slipped down her cheek and fell onto his wrist. You once said time teaches you how to hide the scars, she murmured. But I think it just teaches us who we want to hide them with. The door opened softly. David stepped in, his voice low. He will wake up soon. He kept asking for you before he collapsed. Lila looked up, startled. He did? David nodded. He told me to tell you that he broke his vow. Not because he touched you, but because he started to feel. Lila's breath caught. She glanced back at Alexander, his face calm beneath the soft glow of the machines. Then I guess I broke mine too, she whispered, her voice trembling with something between sorrow and hope. The world outside continued in its rhythm, but inside that hospital room, time seemed to pause, waiting for him to open his eyes. Alexander woke 3 days later. The morning light poured through the hospital blinds, soft and unfamiliar. For a moment, he did not know where he was, or why the air smelled of antiseptic instead of rain. Then he saw her, Lila, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, her head resting against her arm, a faint trace of exhaustion shadowing her face. The sight of her hit him harder than any pain in his chest. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Lila. Her eyes fluttered open instantly. When she saw him awake, relief flooded her features. You are awake, she whispered, standing quickly, tears welling in her eyes. You scared me. He tried to smile, weak but sincere. You came back. You left me no choice, she said, half laughing, half crying. You collapse, and the world stops. He wanted to reach for her hand but hesitated, the old vow still lingering like an invisible chain between them. I thought I lost everything, he said quietly. My company, my name, you. You did not lose me, she said. You just stopped letting me in. He closed his eyes, her words cutting through him like light. I thought keeping distance would protect you. I thought if I stayed cold, you would not get burned by my world. All it did, she said softly, was freeze us both. For a long time, they just looked at each other, the silence between them, no longer empty, but fragile and full of meaning. Then she reached for his hand. Alexander, the world already knows the truth. What they think does not matter anymore. What matters is what we do now. He turned his palm, fingers brushing hers. Then what do you want to do? I want you to stop running from what is real, she said. Stop hiding behind contracts and guilt. Live, feel, be human again. A slow breath escaped his chest, as if something inside finally gave in. Then stay, he whispered. Not because of debt or promise. Stay because you want to. She smiled faintly. That is the only reason I ever would. Over the next few days, his recovery became the quiet bridge they both needed. She brought him soup in paper cups, scolded him for ignoring the nurses, and read to him from the art books she loved. He listened, more alive in those moments than he had felt in years. When the doctor finally cleared him to leave, he refused the limousine waiting outside. "Come with me," he said to her. "There is somewhere I need to go." He took her hand, and together they returned to the Hale mansion. The air inside was still, the piano untouched, the half-finished painting waiting in the conservatory. "You never finished it," he said. "Neither did you," she replied, glancing toward the portrait of Clara that had haunted the house for years. Alexander walked to it, running his fingers over the edge of the frame. "I kept it as punishment," he admitted. "Every time I looked at her, I remembered what I lost. But now I think she would not want me to keep living in that loss." Lila stepped closer. "Then do what she would have wanted. Finish what you started." He nodded slowly. Together they moved the easel to the light. For hours, they worked side by side, brush after brush, the silence between them filled with color instead of pain. When it was done, the portrait was not of Clara alone. It was of both women, Clara's gentle eyes above, Lila's steady gaze below, two halves of the same healing. Alexander stood back, breath caught. "It is beautiful," he said quietly. "No," Lila corrected, smiling softly. "It is honest." He turned to her, something new in his eyes, peace. "Lila, I have spent my life building walls. You tore them down without even trying." "That is because I was never trying to save you," she said. "I was just trying to see you." For the first time, he did not look away. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sun slipped through the glass, warming the room that had once felt like a tomb. Alexander reached for her hand again, this time without hesitation. "Then, let me see you too," he whispered. And for the first time, they both stopped pretending they were anything but two people finally learning how to begin again. Spring arrived quietly, as if the world had decided to start over too. The gardens of the Hale mansion bloomed again, the same roses that had once framed their first awkward walks now glowing beneath the sunlight. Months had passed since the hospital, and everything had changed in ways neither of them could have predicted. Alexander was no longer the man whose every decision was calculated by power. He spent more time at the art studio Lila had helped expand, funding scholarships for young artists under her name but never taking credit. Lila, now confident and radiant, carried herself like a woman who finally belonged to her own story. One afternoon, as she stood in the conservatory finishing another painting, she felt him watching her. He leaned against the doorway, a small box in his hand. "You have that look again," he said, smiling. "The one that makes the world disappear." She turned, laughing softly. "Maybe that is because the world used to be too loud. And now? Now. It is quiet enough to listen." He stepped closer, placing the box on the table between them. "Open it," he said. Inside was a small ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond, set in gold. She looked up at him, startled. "We are already married," she whispered. "Not like this," he said gently. "The first one was a contract. This one is a promise." Her hands trembled as he took the old contract from his pocket, folded neatly, but torn across the middle. "I kept this," he said, "to remind myself of the mistake I made thinking love could ever be written in ink. It can only be written in action." He tore the paper once more and let the pieces fall to the floor. "Lila, from this moment, there are no terms, no rules, no vow that keeps me from you. Only truth." Tears filled her eyes. "You do not have to do this." "I do," he said, "because I meant what I said that night. I would never touch you unless you wanted me to. So I am asking now, not as a man who bought your freedom, but as one who found his through you. Will you stay? Because you choose to?" She looked at him for a long time, every memory between them flooding her heart. The storm, the contract, the music, the silence, and the vow that had both broken and saved them. "Yes," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Because I want to." He smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, his hands steady for the first time in years. "Then that is all that matters." The evening sun spilled golden light across the room, catching on the painting they had finished together. He reached for her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. For a moment, there was no past, no wealth, no headlines, just two people who had walked through fire and somehow found peace on the other side. Later that week, they held a small ceremony by the sea, with only a few close friends. There was no press, no photographers, no grand performance. Just waves, laughter, and a promise whispered under the wind. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander turned to her and said softly, "Do you remember the vow I made that night? That you would never touch me," she said, smiling through tears. "Yes," he said, brushing her cheek, "and I meant it until you asked me to." She laughed, pulling him closer. "Then I am asking." The sound of the ocean filled the silence that followed, blending with their laughter, sealing a love that had survived everything it was never meant to. As the sun sank into the horizon, Alexander whispered, "You were the only thing I ever bought that made me rich." Lila smiled against his shoulder. "You did not buy me, Alexander. You found me. And together, we made something that money could never touch." And with that, the waves carried their story away not as a tale of ownership or redemption, but as proof that even the most broken vows can become the beginning of something pure.